Islandia, it's called like Enemies to Lovers, right? Um, I've never been a fan of like when they just hate each other and suddenly they love each other. So for me, it was first of all crafting a believable chemistry where there is friction, but not because they're so different and they genuinely hate each other. It's because they challenge each other. And then when those barriers come down, that challenging becomes like them getting along, and it's actually like an awe, and they grow together. And fundamentally, they also really like each other. So because Malachi and Kiki, they actually have a lot of similarities, but they're very kind of, the way they go about things is different. And I really enjoyed writing that. And in the way that I kind of create the chemistry is the woman, obviously the woman first. I always work on her first, who her personality is, her own goals, how she can grow, her flaws. I guess she has to have some. Her flaws, and then who is the partner who, of course, will get along with her and all of that good stuff, but also who's going to help her grow and who is going to add to her life. That's really important to me because I'm like, okay, they like each other, but what is the thing? Like, what bonds them together? I don't even see them being friends. I really work on their friendship as well. I think that in all romances I write, the friendship is key for me. That's the romance, because that's what you build the romance on, that foundation of friendship. And so I do a lot of character work. I write so many conversations, some that might not even end up in the book because I'm just trying to get into their rhythm and their pattern, and conversations of like literally like, when was your first kiss? And when I'm in that kind of zone, whether it ends up in the book or not, I feel like it bleeds into the book,
Yeah, because you kind of, I like the idea of you kind of doing conversations that might not make into the book, because you build that chemistry, you've created these characters, and then it's like, okay, now interact, let's see what happens. And the chemistry is explosive. I'm a chemistry girly, like, romance stories don't work for me if you can't feel that crackling on the page. Totally. So obviously you have nailed it. And this book has such a strong voice in Kiki and a really unique sense of humour that comes through your writing. I mean, obviously, if anyone's encountered Bolu in other spaces on social media, through her work, she has this brilliant sense of humour and wit, and it really comes through in the book. What do you think is the special relationship between romance and comedy? And why is it important to have those qualities in your writing? What's the deal with romantic comedy?
Like, romance is humiliating. It's so embarrassing. And I'm a Yoruba babe, so like, it's just so cringe to like be that open with somebody else, and it's just inherently embarrassing. And I feel like part of being a human is being able to laugh at that. Like, as soon as you don't laugh, you'll cry. I think life is either very tragic or it's like comedic. And I feel like humor is such a great coping mechanism, and humor is also a great lens to expose our vulnerabilities in a really relatable way. So for me, they just go hand in hand. And also, romance can be hard, but it's also can feel so light and so freeing, and it's so fun, and so comedy just naturally marries with it. But yeah, you just have to like emotionally strip yourself naked, and I think humor is a great way to show that, really. And also for me, so much of romance is laughter. I think when you're falling in love, it's just like this kind of person make you laugh, and laughing is such a great example of your soul being free and being unguarded. So I feel like romance and comedy are just like very closely entwined for me.
That's so beautiful. And I think laughing just releases certain, I don't know, endorphins or whatever, that can be similar to other feelings. So I think I totally agree. It's really important. And it always bothers me when things are sold as a romantic comedy and you're like, this ain't funny.
Don't get me started. That is my pet peeve.
You need both. You need to do both well, which Bolu, of course, does. Now, am I right in thinking there's a sequel coming to Honey and Spice? It's going to be maybe a little bit longer than we might have hoped, but keep your eyes
Not that
peeled for
long,
it.
guys.
Not too long. 2025, it's not that far away.
Yeah.
But are you comfortable talking a bit about how you've evolved
Sure.
this kind of story and what we can expect from it?
Definitely. Well, yeah, I love Malachi and Kiki for so many reasons. My friends say that like it's because Kiki is just like a kind of me.
Avatar.
Like an avatar. Yeah, exactly. I don't think so. I'm not that narcissistic. But yeah, I love them. I just didn't feel like they were dumb, and I was very fascinated with the idea of okay, you falling in love with your university sweetheart. What happens next? Does their love survive? How does it survive? Do they grow apart? You grow up, and you're no longer in this kind of campus collegiate varsity bubble where everything is concentrated, including emotions. So Sun of the Skin, which is I think that's the title. Yeah, it's 8 years in the future. I'm trying to think of what I can say without spoiling it. It's 8 years in the future, on from Honey and Spice, so it's closer to like present day. And they're like pushing 30, and they've gone through a lot in their lives, and I don't know if I'm trying to think of what I can say.
That is enticing enough.
It's a wedding in the core of the story. It is a second chance romance. If you read romances, you know what that means. And it's a lot more adult. And I'm not gonna lie, like when I'm in the middle of writing it in the moment, I'm nearly finished. But I was like, oh gosh, I hope people are gonna be like, because I'm grown up now. I've grown up since writing Honey and Spice, and they're grown up. So it's not gonna be exactly the same as Honey and Spice. It's a lot more mature. That in the real world now, and it's still gonna have like the beats. It's Malachi and Kiki. It's Malachi and Kiki, so that you know what to expect, but it's a lot more grown up, and yeah, it's more, I guess, more serious, which is natural because they're in the real world now.
Serious things.
Things get real when you're out.
Like,
Yeah.
I guess it's time to get real. I think that's so exciting. I think people love to, once they fall in love with the characters and characters being together, getting to kind of evolve and grow with them is just wonderful, and getting to kind of dive back into their world.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to read it.
Thank you.
And I know your fans will be too. But I kind of wanted to delve into a bit of romantic theory. We've already touched on some of it, but kind of the ideas that you've been positing as you delve into writing romantic stories. You have this brilliant passage in Netflix and Chill that brilliantly encapsulates, I've said brilliant so many times today, sorry, that encapsulates a lot of the tensions and the notion of romance through Temi, the character in the story, through her lens. And I'd like to read a bit of it. I'm going to read slowly because of this whole thing. If you don't mind, I'm going to read it and then we can talk a bit about it. So in the story she says, romance was a high-risk emotional expense. I didn't have space for it. I wasn't willing to make space for it. There's something about romantic trust that gives intimate power to its object. You can have many friends, but traditionally romance is a narrower scope. It has the element of being chosen. Its object has something over you. It knows you've been separated from an awe of technical potentials. With the right person, that should feel like a privilege. In the wrong hands, a license to exploit. If the wrong hands are attached to a canny brain, it means they'll work out that the more they make themselves chosen, the more they can get. I think that's so incredibly...
Dang, I wrote that.
Come on, snaps for that. Building from that, as Black people, as Black women, the stereotype, as you've already talked about a little bit, is perhaps that we aren't soft. We aren't the center of romantic endeavors. The popular imagination might see us, as you've said, as caregivers or harlots or harridans. And Temi and later Kiki are women who are somewhat defensive of the idea of love, and then they have their defenses broken down. So what do you think is important about the portrayal of Black women in romantic settings, be that on the page or the stage or the screen? And to Temi's point in the extract from Netflix and Chill, do you think that there's a sense of power exchange? How does that affect how we view as Black women falling in love and romantic relationships?
It can feel, I think in general, it can feel like a power exchange, especially if you're dating men, because of course there's like this patriarchy, all of that good stuff. It feels like you're relinquishing something, especially if you're a woman who values, you know, her mind and everything. And there's something that, and I blame, obviously, patriarchy may seem this way, but like romance is seen as weak, and leaning into it seems like it's weak, and tenderness seems like it's weak. And so in doing that, you feel like you're letting something go. And that's what we're taught. We're taught is kind of either or. It's either you're an independent woman or you like soft life. That's just it. And I feel like it's really important for me to show the complexity of Black women, because all the Black women I know, honestly, some of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life. So funny, so driven, so ambitious, and also so tender, and also seeking that love. And their life is full of love in their friendships and their family, but also they want romantic love. And I feel like sometimes they find that hard to admit, because they feel like it's almost letting themselves down and what they've achieved down and their own ambition down. And I really wanted to show that tension in my work. And I wrote that when I was 24, 25, around that age. And even in the beginning, that's based on something that I wrote when I was like 17. So I think that's why I'll write about a 17-year-old, because I was in that space. And I was feeling it then as well, because I was like, boys are a distraction as well. But I was so focused on my work, and I was so focused, especially boys that age. I saw it. I saw that they were a waste of time, because they wanted it, and they would take my attention as something that, as almost something to like, as a power over me, you know, and it was something to win, and it wasn't about me as a person. So yeah, that was all of the things that I was grappling with, and in my kind of work, I'm always seeking to show the complexity of Black women, of showing us as tender and soft, but also we can be hard-headed and ambitious, and also sometimes we're flawed. Kiki is very stubborn, and she lashes out when she's hurt. And I feel like sometimes on the flip side of it, we almost try to be overcorrect Black women's portrayals and show them as like, I don't know, like too perfect almost. And we should have the freedom to be flawed as well.
Absolutely. And ambition is something that, in my own writing, I am also very keen to portray. And If I Don't Have You, I definitely was thinking about a Black woman who her aims and ambitions are almost more important to her than love, like love is inconvenient. And I think that's real, and it's something I can really identify with as a person, but also in writing. Where have I got to? Yeah, so the theme of this talk is around love in the Black imagination. And there's this idea that romance or romantic comedy set up unrealistic expectations, or a sense of what we would expect in real life interactions that aren't real. But we do see real life romances. They exist, of course. And you know, you even kind of talk about in Loving Colour your parents' love story. But I wanted to ask you about this and kind of, do you think you have to be a fantasist or have a rich fantasy life to be a romance author? You know, we see romantasy as this term that's thrown around a lot in literature at the moment, which obviously is leaning more into actual fantasy fiction. But how much do you tread that line of reality versus fantasy? Do you have to be a fantasist to write this?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think Bell Hooks actually talks about this, and she says that, you know, when women talk about what they want is called fantasy, you know? And for me, I'm just writing about a man who loves a woman with respect and is genuinely in awe of her and likes her as a person, who gets on with her. And I'm sorry, that's not fantasy to me. That's not, and I have it in my own life, and I see it with my parents, and I see it in the relationships that I love seeing, you know. And I think it's more of an indictment on the streets, that it's seen as a fantasy, because like the spirit of, you know, all the romances, obviously there's bits that are like, you know, I wouldn't even say what they're extra, but it's for instance, I'm trying to say, I think of something
Like
that's spoiling it. Heightened. I was going to give an example of Honey and Spice. Can I? Yeah.
Please.
So in Honey and Spice, Kiki is a secret, like she loves fantasy and romance and all of that good stuff. And Malachi knows she wants to go to a convention celebrating that, and she doesn't want to go, but then he surprises her with tickets and then dresses up as her favorite character in it. Maybe him dressing up was like, men might not do that, but that for me, that's the spirit of that, is that a man who's interested in your interest enough to support you in them and also want to indulge you in them. And I don't know, I've experienced that, and I know many women who have experienced that, and I don't think that's out of this world. And even dressing up, I don't think it's that out of this world. But it's, for me, it's just like standards, you know? And I think, and it's sad to me that so many like women's romantic standards are seen as being unrealistic, when really they're based on a mutual respect and somebody liking you and treating you as an equal and delighting in you, you know?
Definitely, and I think that says a lot about how romantic fiction is viewed, and kind of the interpretation of this fiction that largely is read by women as lesser. Does that bother you? Do you ever think about that when you're writing? When you started out, were you considering, oh, I need to write a certain type of fiction, particularly as a Black woman, that is interpreted in a highfalutin way?
Never, not for 1 second. I think it was as simple for me as this. I love romance. I love reading romance. I stole Mills and Boons off my mom's bookshelf. When I was 12 years old, my school librarian, who knew my being by name because I was a nerd and I always would stay at lunchtime, gave me a big copy of Pride and Prejudice, and I fell in love. And that was it for me. And then I was like, oh, I think I like reading this, and I think I want to make, and I like making up stories. I'm good at English lit, and I'm good at like when they give you assignments to make up stories. I want to do this. I'm going to make up the stories that I like to read. And it was as simple as that. And I'm Black, so I'm going to write about Black women. I had a friend who also enjoyed writing, and she was Black, and then she was writing about white characters with like grey eyes as the main protagonist. I was like, but why? But why? I never had that. I never had a fantasy to be white, and even in the stories that I'm writing, it didn't even occur to me to write about white character, because it just is me, and it's the world that I know. So I didn't. I just wanted to write the truth according to me, basically. And I think that once you start thinking about the audience and in that way, and fighting against white supremacy, then white supremacy is almost getting into your mind, because now it's controlling your creativity, when really you should be just saying the story that's on your mind and on your heart, you know?
Absolutely. And, I do think, how with my publisher hat on, there's a pressure for people who are so-called